Hi everyone, welcome back to the Big Five Mental Health Podcast. Today's episode is on OCD, Obsessive Compulsive Disorder. So as usual, today's podcast is going to have a little bit of a schedule to it. First, we're going to start with basic facts, things you need to know. Then we're going to move into statistics, real research backed by evidence, doctors, scientists. Then we're going to go into our student speaker section where a real student is going to share their experience with mental health. Then we're going to go into our global charity, which is going to show a charity that's working to improve the lives of people with this condition and how you can get involved with them. Then we're going to go to my personal favorite part, Celebrity Spotlight, which is going to show the portrayal of this mental health challenge in the media, people who you may not know have the mental health challenge and what they say about it. Finally, we're going to go to our therapist corner, where a specialist on this mental health challenge is going to tell all, give you everything they know, tips on how to deal with it if you think you might have it, etc. And that's it. So let's get into it. Hi everyone, so here are some basic facts, things you need to know about OCD. So as you know, it is Obsessive Compulsive Disorder. It's more common statistically in women than men, and often onsets between teenage and adult years, but there are obviously exceptional cases to that. And so the most basic thing to understand about OCD is that it's a system of obsessive thoughts or urges which then trigger compulsions to temporarily assuage the anxiety that comes from the obsessive thoughts or urges. So, a most basic example that I can probably think you've heard of is maybe washing hands or a germophobia, that kind of thing. If you have a fear of germs, that is your obsession. And you are very, very afraid of germs. You can't stop thinking about what could happen if you do get contaminated with germs or if you contaminate someone else with them. And so in order to relieve that anxiety in the moment, you engage in a compulsion, which could be, for example, washing your hands excessively, in order to make that anxiety go away in that moment because it's just really, really weighing on you. And the problem with that, with OCD, is just that you would think, okay, you do it, you wash your hands, and it's over. But the way that OCD works in someone with it in their brain is that every time they do the compulsion, their mind just tells them that the thought needs to be more worried about. So then they wash their hands, and then as soon as they're done washing their hands, they're like, oh, but maybe I didn't do it well enough, or maybe there are more germs, and maybe I need to do it again. And so then they'll find themselves washing their hands 3, 4, 5 times in a row, getting their hands dry and cracked and just, spending a lot of time doing something they don't need to be doing in order to make that anxiety go away, but then not knowing that the cycle is vicious and it just comes back. So that can be really, really hard for someone with OCD, and that's the basic premise of it. And there are just so many different manifestations of it, but that's the basic idea. You have an obsession, then you have anxiety about it, and you do a compulsion or something kind of repetitive to make it go away, but it only ends up making it worse. And so it's just kind of vicious cycle of compulsions and obsessions and things like that. So some common obsessions, obviously there are so many different kinds, but like I said, a fear of germs, contamination, there's some about excessive neatness or having things put away or in a straight line or things like that, which you've probably seen most often portrayed in the media, although that is not the only thing that people with OCD struggle with by far. There are some connected to There are some connected to scrupulosity or doing things right, morality, religion, harming oneself or others, worrying about harming oneself or others, worrying about doing things right, doing things well, driving safety, or also repetitive motions, things I'm sure you've heard of, people having to tap something or touch something a certain number of times in a row or a pattern to make sure that nothing bad happens that day. It's almost kind of like an excessive superstition that controls you rather than you controlling it. And so that's what makes it so difficult. And some common compulsions that come with that can be like the hand washing for germs, constantly adjusting or reorganizing something in the home if you're worried that it doesn't look right, having to confess that you've done something wrong if you think you have, or having to go to church or a religious place often to kind of atone for whatever you think you've been doing wrong, obsessing, kind of counting, repeating things, touching things over and over again, rechecking things, driving back home to check if you left the stove on, even though you know you didn't, but you have to go open the door, check if you left it on, you didn't, go back. It's things like that. It really doesn't discriminate. OCD doesn't discriminate. There's a possibility of a genetic component, but it's just as easy for it to show up in someone who's never had it or their relatives have never had it. There's no history, so it really can be kind of just a shock thing. As far as treatment goes, there are in fact some really great treatments for OCD available right now that are either in the form of therapy, medication, and then also some things you can do to just make your life a little bit easier if you do think you might have it. So first, for medicine, as I always have to say, obviously medicine is something that needs to be consulted with a mental health professional first before doing anything. So if you're going to think about that, it can be great for some people, but you should talk to a doctor before getting on medicine. But I just wanted to let you know that some of the kinds of medicines that we have are called SSRIs. They are often similar to anti-anxiety or anti-depression medication because those two tend to go hand in hand, and OCD is technically an anxiety disorder, so reducing that anxiety can lessen symptoms of OCD. Some of them include anafranil, Zoloft, Prozac. Yeah, those can be really helpful for people, but again, of course, you must consult a mental health professional before going on any type of medication. And then as far as therapy, there's a very specific kind of OCD-centric therapy called ERP, or exposure response prevention therapy. And so it involves facing one's obsessions that happen with OCD and then resisting the urge to do the compulsion that comes with them. So using our hand washing example again, if someone's really, really worried that there's going to be germs or they're going to get contaminated or contaminate someone else, and they really, really want to wash their hands, but they're in exposure response prevention therapy, they're going to sit there with their therapist and resist the overwhelming urge to wash their hands. And that's going to be really hard because obviously washing the hands, the compulsion, is a way to temporarily, like we said, make the anxiety feel a little bit less. But as we know, it only ends up making it worse in the long term. So by resisting it, however hard it may be, you're slowly training your brain not to have so much of an anxiety response to whatever compulsion you're thinking about. And it does work. It's been shown to be really, really helpful with people with OCD. And while it's difficult, it just really requires practice and a mental health professional. So if you think that might be something that would work for you, you should definitely look it up. And I will be including some resources too in the podcast, as always, for you to check it out. And then finally, as far as just lifestyle, as we know, it can be very difficult to manage OCD or any mental health challenge with school, and so I'm always a big advocate of 504 or IEP plans, which are kind of tailored mental health accommodation plans that can give you extra time, separate workspaces, breaks, things like that. They work for tests too, or standardized testing, and they can be really, really helpful with someone who has OCD or something else to just feel more comfortable in school and feel like they're not falling behind, which everyone deserves. So I would talk to a counselor or someone in your school, a teacher, if you think that might be right for you. And I think what I've been told is a lot of people are surprised by how open schools are to it. And so if you think that it might be something that you're interested in, you should definitely check it out. And then, as we have said with all of these challenges, the portrayal of OCD in media or common kind of life is very different than the actual feeling of it. And so I'm sure, as you've heard, OCD can kind of be shown in like movies and TV as maybe just someone who's a little neat or a little bit neurotic looking, kind of overly schedules everything they do or puts everything in a specific place. And that can be a symptom of it. But as we learned, there are so many more obsessions and compulsions that happen with OCD, and a lot of them are happening internally. So the best we can do for someone with OCD is just to have a little bit of grace with them and remember that it's a really, really hard internal battle and internal struggle that they're fighting, and it's not always what we think it is. So that's something good to remember about OCD as well, and just any mental health challenge in general. So that was our basic fact section of OCD, and now we're going to go into OCD by the numbers, the statistics, some evidence-based research, and things that you can learn about just the demographics and people who have OCD, and learn that you're really not alone if you do think that you might have it. So let's go into that.
I'm Brynn, I am 14, I'm a freshman, and I have multiple mental illnesses including OCD. The onset of my OCD was around the middle of 7th or 8th grade, I can't quite remember. And then I was talking to my therapist about it, and I got I haven't been professionally diagnosed, but my therapist and my psychiatrist have confirmed that I have OCD, so pretty good indication. That was about towards the end of 8th grade. And yeah, I've been working on it with my therapist, so it's gotten better than what it was, but I still struggle with it. So typically I'll have some sort of intrusive thought that'll trigger my OCD, and then I'll have to perform these compulsions to get that specific thought to go away or quiet down or affect me less. And it takes up a good amount of my time day to day. So a lot of the times it'll be a very graphic scenario in which someone I love dies or something terrible happens, which is usually not very likely to happen, but that's what my intrusive thoughts are.
I see. And what are the compulsions that come with that?
The most common ones I have are, for some reason, something related to laundry. It used to be that I couldn't fold my laundry at all, and I would just shove it in my drawer. But then it switched earlier this year, and now I have to fold everything perfectly, or else something terrible will happen. Or another common one is I cannot step on cracks a lot of the time. I'm trying to think of common ones I have is that I can't touch anything that has a 3 on it, or anything related to 3, because for some reason my brain does not like that number.
Okay.
Or I'll have to repeat things 8 times. One I do every single day is whenever I'm walking somewhere, I push the crosswalk button 8 times. And then when I'm in the car, because one of my most common intrusive thoughts is that I'll open the car door on the freeway and jump out, which I'm not gonna do. But it still kind of freaks me out. So a lot of the times I'll either have to sit on my hands or sit perfectly still during a car drive, so that doesn't happen. A lot of the times the compulsions aren't that noticeable, and I'm able to deal with them on my own, which is what I sort of prefer to do. Because I don't have a history of OCD in my family. It just sort of happened with my mental health being so interesting. It since it's related to my anxiety, it just sort of popped up. So a lot of the times I'll deal with it on my own, but when I can't, I'll usually go to a friend or a counselor. I had a panic attack before school one time, and I was like, you know what? I can go to the counselor. So I went to her office, and then she ended up telling me that I should just ignore my anxiety and then sending me back to class like 10 minutes later. So I was kind of like, no, I'm so serious. So I was like, I was pretty reluctant to go to the school counselors after that, but then I decided like, you know what? It's a new counselor, I'll give her a try, and then she was pretty helpful.
That's great.
She like actually took my like issue seriously. So I was like, well, I could go to her if I have to. I still prefer to avoid them because like I don't know, they kind of freak me out. I'm like used to being discriminated against because I'm queer, so it's just sort of like I'm like used to it. I think it contributes to my anxiety. I'm sure. Because it's hard to be queer in this day and age. But other than that, I think, I don't know, I'm pretty happy with myself, so.
That's great. What do you do with your therapist for the OCD specifically? Like, are there techniques you work on or things that you do?
Sometimes exposure therapy.
Okay, tell me about that.
It's basically where you expose yourself to what you like try to, for me, avoid in my OCD. So it'll be like, step on a crack for 5 seconds, and then she'll like help me work through the anxiety that follows.
And is it really difficult for you with like stepping on the crack and in those 5 seconds or whatever that you have to do it? What does it feel like?
I just get really, really, really anxious and uncomfortable, and it's like pretty hard to deal with, but it's not impossible. And then the more I do like exposure therapy, the easier it gets, obviously, because I'm like more used to feeling anxious, which sounds really bad. Yeah.
Do you feel comfortable talking to like so you said your friends are good, but like your family or anyone else, obviously you said counselors, about your mental health, or who's like the biggest supporter for you in that way?
A lot of the times it's my friends, because some of them like also have mental health struggles, so I can like talk to them. And then other than that, it would probably be my mom, because she also like struggles with anxiety. She doesn't struggle with OCD, but she's able to help me with like the anxiety part of it. So that's pretty nice. My advice is probably to write down what you're gonna say, because a lot of the times when you're like first breaching the topic with someone, you don't know how they'll react. So you can get really nervous about telling them, which is really valid, obviously.
Yeah.
So what I do is I usually, if I'm telling someone new, I'll write down the key points so that I won't forget anything important, and so that it can help me like explain exactly what I'm dealing with. And then another thing I'll do is I'll ask them if they have any questions, because a lot of the times the things that they get wrong or are ignorant about are just simply because they haven't encountered this before. So if you can do your best to answer their questions, it might help them like help and accept you.
I have a master's in clinical pastoral counseling. I have been working as a clinical counselor for 23 years.
Oh, wow.
This is my main area of practice. I've specialized in obsessive compulsive disorder and
Mhm.
anxiety disorders for that entire 23 years in private practice.
Oh, wow.
I've also created continuing education seminars for other mental health professionals about OCD. I've spoken at various, workshops and seminars and such, done other podcasts, things like that, that I love the education piece of that. But obviously, I've been in private practice, and so I see, clients regularly, where from children probably as young as 5 years old, who usually, they have a parent or two with them during session as I help, them, the family and the child understand, how to manage their symptoms differently, all the way up to, adults. And so that's my job, is to really give education to people to understand, what their symptoms are, what, assessment for diagnoses, and then help them practice new skills and tools in order to manage their symptoms in a healthy way, so they can live, an awesome life without having, whatever their anxiety issue is impacting them, in a significant way, but they can live the life that they want to live.
So, for anyone who kind of doesn't know, because we're hoping that the podcast will appeal to anyone who's just trying to learn or anything, how would you explain OCD in kind of a general way to someone who's never heard of it or is unfamiliar?
Right. So what OCD is at its basic level is that it's an inaccurate threat, like a false alarm that does not turn off when you use logic or facts to try to say, like, oh, this is not really this scary, or, this is not really true, or whatever. If you use any of those logic or facts, it doesn't turn it off. In fact, it ramps it up. And then it gets stuck in that person's head, and it's like danger, 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 danger. So it's kind of like one of those, if you have a fire drill at school, and you probably know it's a fire drill, but you still feel kind of that anxiety because the alarms are going off, and you have to line up, you have to go out, and you just feel some of that anxiety. So it's a false alarm that says it's actually really a fire, when it's not actually a fire. So it's an inaccurate threat in your brain that tells you something is a danger threat level, and then it tells you you have to immediately, urgently figure it out, fix it, make it better, make sure it doesn't happen right now, right now. And that would be the compulsion part of it. So the obsession is the inaccurate threat. The compulsion is, what do you do to try to turn it off, which is actually not necessarily needed to do that, because the threat level is not accurate. It's generally about something that is not happening right now. It's about a future what if. What if, like, this doesn't happen this way? Or what if people think about me in this way? And you get an intrusive thought, which everybody gets. Everybody gets intrusive thoughts, which are random, strange, quirky, weird thoughts that pop up in your head. And for people without OCD, when those pop up, somebody just goes, that's a little weird. Oh, well. And they move on. But then obsession is where you go, oh no, why did I get that? Why is that there? And then it turns on all those alarms, that false alarm on the inside. So no matter what the content or topic of that, like what if thought, or that, oh no, like this is this or something, which is usually about a future thing, then it makes you feel like you're zoomed in, tunnel vision. You have to like figure it out or do something now, and stuff like that. That is generally going to be how OCD shows up. So it can be in various things. Most people have heard about, like, the germs. What if there's germs on something that I touch, and then therefore I have to, continue to wash, and then I get a thought of, did I wash well enough? Did I actually scrub everything well enough, to keep you doing something like that? So, some of the main subtypes are, contamination, harm thoughts. So any type of harm, which is these thoughts, especially harm thoughts, are the opposite in terms of who you are as a person. So if you, love people, love children, have an empathetic heart that cares about people, you're going to get intrusive thoughts about like harming yourself or them in some way, or harm coming to them in some way, and you're going like, you're like, get away from me right now. That's the inaccurate threat, is that there's a problem with it, versus that's just weird, let it move along. So that's the difference. So those are some of them. It can be about relationships, like, oh no, do they really like me? Should I be in this relationship? Maybe I shouldn't. How do I know if I'm in the right relationship? It can be about some of those things. It can be about some, whatever for you would be considered inappropriate thoughts. In some ways that could be, again, harm or sexual, or, thoughts that you're like, ooh, yuck, that's not me, or I don't like those, that kind of thing. And you want to like get it off of you, kind of stuff. And it feels like you have to like get it off of you in that kind of way. So really, it can be about a lot of different topics, but it has that element of the intrusive. This is not me. I'm not trying to think about these things or whatever. And it feels like danger, danger. I have to do something. Those are the elements that you're looking for when you're looking for something for obsessive compulsive, versus it just being more general anxiety, which is kind of like, what lots of people in the world have. Because the thing about OCD, well, anxiety in general, but especially OCD, is it's like a bully who wants to go and find your weak spot. And so if you understand some developmental things that are going on in the teenage years, you can understand the areas it's really going to, specifically attack teens. So one of the areas we know developmentally is the hormones, changing hormonally, and those chemical things going on hormonally causes more like emotional roller coasters, in the teenage years. So a lot of like, it increases that threat level, that anxiety feeling, and then it gives this like catastrophic, and then for teens, believing that their feelings and thoughts equal truth. And it's always going to be that way. If I feel this way right now, or I have these terrible, yucky thoughts right now, it's always going to be that way. So that's one of the tricks. OCD has a lot of tricks, like a good bully that tries to pull you in and make you be all worried and scared. And that's one of them, is believing your thoughts, especially your feelings, like that those are really true. They're true, like about you, or you're a terrible person, if that's what it's telling you. Believing it because you feel it, or you have a thought about it. So teens are more susceptible because of hormones, to believe some of those kinds of things.
What would you say, in your opinion, is the most difficult part about having OCD?
I think it's the idea of knowing, because research shows that folks with OCD do tend to have a higher intellectual intelligence in terms of EQ, and understanding that they're different, probably different. Their thought processes are different. The way they react to things because of those intrusive thoughts, and the false alarm threats. And they're like, I'm different. I'm different than how other people are handling it. Then they're freaking out. Like, I don't know what to do with being different. And then they're believing all of the things that OCD is saying about being different, and that something's wrong with them, and it's catastrophic, and they'll never get it fixed. It'll always be here. So coming at the conversation believing the person wants to help you, but maybe having to educate them a little bit that what you're giving me works for you, yay, but it doesn't work for me.
And on the flip side, if you're a person who's being asked about this or being confided in about OCD struggles, whether or not you know anything about it, what is your best recommendation of how to receive that in a way that will make the person most comfortable?
Being empathetic. Wow, that sounds really hard. Tell me more about it. I really want to like hear how that affects you, and then how can I be a support to you? Like, what would be supportive and helpful for you? Those are good ways to respond. Now, one of the things that you do have to understand, it happens with all anxiety, but especially OCD, is something called reassurance. So when people are reassurance seeking, it sounds like they're asking you, do you think this is okay? Do you think what I said or did was okay? Just checking. Do you think it's okay? Like, and if somebody's asking you those kind of questions and you can tell they're anxious when they're asking you, they're probably doing it as a compulsion. And the thing is that when you answer them, it doesn't, it's not, they're like, oh, okay, good. I feel better now. And then they can move on. No, they're like, this? What about this other thing? Or they come back 5 minutes later. But what about this other part? So, and the best way you can do with them, and they will not always understand this, but the best way you can be empathetic and supportive is it sounds like it's really hard for you, like your anxiety can't take, an answer to something. It might be you need a different strategy than me just answering you, giving you an answer every time. You might need a different tool here than what I'm giving you. So that, good friends hopefully can be honest and give that honest feedback. And the person, if they're in the midst of their OCD, are probably like that's the last thing they want to hear. They just want you to make them feel better. And they can maybe get a little upset with you. But that's the best way to be a really good friend is if they keep asking you the same thing over and over, you say, I think this is something more than just the information. I don't think you actually really need this information. There might be something more going on. It's a spark. And what you want to learn through the treatment is called ERP, exposure response prevention, which means that it's the direction of how you're moving. So most of the compulsions is where you're moving back or sideways. Like, oh no, like go away, and like I'll distract, I'll do something else. Over here is what most of us do because like none of us want to go towards the scary thing or the scary thought. That's why ERP is so important, which you generally it's best to have some sort of professional reference in person to help you learn ERP because you have to expose, meaning you move forward towards the worrisome, thing. So I always make it seem like that it's a haunted house. So if you've ever gone into like at Halloween, and you've gone into a haunted house, why people would do that is beyond me. I have anxiety. I would never intentionally do something that makes me anxious. But it's a good metaphor. So the idea is when you go into a haunted house on purpose and you walk in the front door, it is the scariest the first time you go through it because you don't know what's going to happen. So you don't know when somebody's going to jump out. You don't know when noises are going to happen and stuff. You're just like, oh, and you're walking through the haunted house and you get out the back door and you're like, yay, I made it. But ERP is let's go back through the scary haunted house again. And you keep going back. And if you did it times in a row, you wouldn't be as scared on the 10th time because your brain did something called habituation. Your brain learned that it's not actually as scary as it said. Now with OCD, you have to learn that by going through the scary haunted house in your brain and the worries in a way where you're not like believing them and saying, yes, these are all true. You have to like, I don't know if it's true or not, going to stay in uncertainty and walk through, the scariness. I have my folks like write down the scary, thoughts and just kind of sit in the haunted house with it, because your brain is very intelligent. It's going to figure out quickly those things aren't actually really true to that level. And it's going to that's a false alarm. You have to move towards it and respond differently. And that's what ERP is all about. And you can tell just by my explanation, that is really tough and hard to do, which is why you generally need a professional resource to help, teach you how to do those skills and help you practice it at the beginning. So that becomes your new way of responding, which literally changes the coding in your brain. It's something called neuroplasticity. It's so cool that we can go in and change that coding so that the next time you walk into the next haunted house, you're like, oh yeah, that's probably going to be pretty funny. I'm going to laugh. The noise, I'll get like, oh, and you're like, how is that? What's that? Rather than, oh my gosh, oh my gosh. Your brain really can learn how to do that, especially if you think you might have OCD, to definitely talk to a professional that has that training specifically in OCD, because not everybody who is a mental health counselor or doctor really understands that. So OCD is, in my opinion, the best.
You see people assuming about OCD that is not actually true.
So people tend to focus on the external actions that we would call compulsions, and then say, oh, I do those too, so I'm so OCD, or something like that. I wash my hands extra times. I don't like touching something or whatever, and then they use that label in a way that is not clinically accurate, and stuff. And for somebody who actually has OCD, I've talked to, even this week, I was talking to a couple of my teens who told me about some of their friends using that kind of statement, like, oh, I'm so OCD because, this, that, and the other thing. And for my teen, she's going like, oh no, that's not really what it is. And it's so much worse because OCD attacks your character, who you are as a person, because it makes you feel so separate and strange and weird than anybody else, which is normal in teenage land, but it's even worse with somebody who actually has it. So when somebody uses it incorrectly, where they're just talking about the external things, that you do like multiple times, or, I feel like I have to keep my room neat. Oh, I'm so OCD. It actually is dismissive of the terror and the feeling of like, I am like a weird, strange person in the sea of everybody around me. It really is dismissive of that, which is why I always focus on that's the obsessive part, is those thoughts of saying something's wrong with me compared to everybody else. And so that's the part that the education I'm hoping, gets out there, is it's not about those actions where we're like, oh, I'm going to use that term, I'm so OCD because I do certain things in certain weird, quirky ways, and stuff. And so if we see it on shows or movies, or people use that, in that way, and people pick it up, it really is kind of a slap in the face and dismissive, to the difficulty that people who actually have OCD, really live in every single day. So we want to be a little more, just like, the world is trying to be a little more understanding of everybody's, differences, and not have these biased prejudices, against people in certain ways. Include the idea of being OCD in one of those. That is not just a term to generally use, because it really, means something to the group of people who are inflicted, with those intrusive, obsessive kinds of things. It is always helpful to have a professional coach you in the same way. So whether you're learning how to play the piano or the guitar, or, play a sport or whatever, you can look up YouTube, appropriate YouTube videos, and you can practice on your own, and stuff. But you generally will get the information you need to understand the diagnosis, and then understand the treatment, and then have somebody coach you to practice you. Generally, that's going to move you along a little quicker, and stuff. So there's the point where somebody gets to the point where like they really are like at a stuck, like I'm trying really, really hard and I'm hitting my head on like a brick wall. I'm trying really hard and it feels like that it won't change. My anxiety doesn't go down. My thoughts won't change and whatever. That's where I'm always, concerned, especially with teens, that they get discouraged, depressed, and they're going to give up, and such. And so don't do that. That's when you absolutely should talk to your doctor or a therapist or somebody at that point, if you want to try learning and understanding with the resources that I gave today first.
So they say, I've been getting violent, intrusive thoughts about hurting or killing myself or others, and they do disturb me slightly, but I also have a small lingering urge to act on it. I
Mhm.
I also don't feel the need to get rid of these thoughts because I think they're kind of fun to have.
Mhm.
Should I get antipsychotics or should I try Zoloft again? Obviously, you probably can't give that kind of advice, but
Mhm.
what should they do? Um, and then it said also Zoloft only made me want to stop hurting others, but made me so numb that I wanted to jump off a cliff to feel something.
Okay. So let me give you from the clinical perspective, like if that person was in my office,
Yeah.
and how we would talk about, all of those things.
Mhm.
So again, the broader context is think about us as human beings. When drive down the road and there's like a car accident on the side of the road, like cars had an accident and they're on the side of the road. Do you know the term rubbernecking?
Yes. Right.
Okay.
Yes.
As humans, we are all like, I want to see the harm thing or the weird thing. I want to look and see. Like we find those kinds of things somewhat morbidly interesting. So first I would normalize that is what humans do, is that humans have this sort of morbid thing. That's why we've got like, the types of movies that we have, about, different, things of bad things happening or whatever, just as humans. That it's so some of those weird kind of intrusive kind of thoughts that come up, there is some morbid fascination at times. So we want to normalize that is not that does not automatically mean that there's something wrong. So that would be my first thing. Automatic. When we're trying to say, are these things that distinguishing in session with somebody about, are these things that do have a like it does it like you're like, oh no, yeah, take it away versus, oh, I don't really like it. That makes me feel uncomfortable. But I kind of feel like, oh, I should, do something. Urges are part of OCD, so that is one of the ways that it manifests. And one of the coping mechanisms that humans have at times is that we want to actually move closer to the accident on the side of the road and look at it closer as a way to try to figure out, am I scared of it? Do I want it? Do I not? And that can be a compulsion of trying to figure out, like, are you scared of it? Is a problem? Is it not a problem? That can be a compulsion, is trying to figuring it out and figuring out, and then checking is a compulsion of checking. Am I feeling scared? Am I like attracted? Do I want it? Do I not? All of that, rumination can be part of OCD with a compulsion. About it, there's some things you have to figure out. And then just in general, in terms of medications, so just in general, the role of medication is to be able to sometimes, the brain does not have the level of like serotonin, dopamine, some of those things, and too much adrenaline. some chemical things are going on where it's not those chemicals are not working properly. And so what I'm always looking at with my clients is, are they able to do that ERP where they're able to move into the haunted house without being terrified the entire time? Because if they're always terrified, then their brain is not doing that habituating, figuring it out. They may need medication to help, like instead of it being this anxiety, to lower it down to like what's a sort of a reasonable amount that you can still move forward and do the treatment. So the goal of medication is to help you do that treatment that changes the coding in your brain, not just like make you not feel things or not be, anxious anymore. So as this person said, if all they did when they took a particular medication was just feel numb and not feel anything, then that's, very likely they need to talk to their doctor about that's what we call it blunting, emotional blunting. That is a side effect that can happen with medication, but there's a lot of medications out there that just work with your body chemicals, and you might have to try, a different one or another kind in order to see if it works better with your body chemistry. If somebody wants to contact me, and just ask a question of what to do, and stuff like that, you can look my profile up on LinkedIn. That's where you find me as Judy Lair, and stuff. And you're welcome to contact me. And I'm like, here's some resources. Here's the direction to go. I'm happy to point you in the direction. But what I do, Zara, hopefully you can tell, I have been doing this for a very, very long time because I love and am excited to get the information out, the education out, and encourage people. Things can change. Things can be different and be better if you pay attention to how you're thinking and what your beliefs are, and understand you can change those. You can have skills and tools and make changes that help you then make different actions and live your life out differently. You don't have to stay where you are. There is definitely hope out there.
Thank you so much for watching this episode of the Big Five Mental Health Podcast. As always, there will be links for everything that we use to make this, and research links, things that you can do to get involved, all linked at the bottom of the podcast. So hopefully you'll make use of those. And I just want to thank you so much for being here, because ending the stigma and educating is really a two-way street. So whether you're someone who thinks you might have a mental health challenge or are the friend or loved one of someone who does, it's really important that you're here, and it was a great first step to take. So I hope you learned something. Thank you so much, and I'll see you next time.